these common disco lights on eBay, the ones that just have it basically looks like a lamp, but it's got the rotating lens in the front and it's just showers hundreds of points of light out. They seem to be getting cheaper and better, so I thought it'd be worth buying one to take apart. Noting that this one has this really annoying noise. I think it's the motor, but it's quite high-pitched noise it makes, but it's quite a good effect. It's quite a nice effect. It's worth mentioning before I open this, notice how the white circles are quite diffused, and also the pink dots, because this has 6 colours in it, this lamp. So let's take a look inside it. So before I open this, it's worth noting that this unit draws 3.4 watts, and I can already see through the casing that it's got a little wrapped power supply inside that suggests just the standard switch mode power supply, which is very common for these. So it'll be a standard sort of 3 watt power supply as used in GU10 lamps. So let's unplug that, because the noise it makes is really quite annoying. It really is quite a high-pitched whistly noise. I think it is just the motor. I don't know if there's some interaction between the motor and the switch mode power supply. Certainly when you stall the motor it stops, though that's not really an indication. So let's open this. As with so many of these devices, the lens assembly is just fastened on by a screw in the end, and that pretty much exposes everything inside. So when I open it up, instead of the earliest ones just had a red, a green and a blue LED, this one has 6 LEDs, and the reason the white LED and the pink LED looked so diffused, really much duller than all others, is because while the other ones are very sharp points of light, these ones have the phosphor coating over them, and that sort of acts like a diffuser. And I can already tell that I could tell before I opened it, if I turn this, you'll see the blue LED lights just when I turn the shaft, which suggests the motor is just tapped across the blue LED, which is odd because one of the most ferocious colours is usually the green, and blue is one of the duller colours, so it would have been nice tacking that across that instead. And what they're doing here is they're getting the power supply effectively. Oh, where's my notepad? There we go. That's a good idea. Traditionally, the first units, so mains in, just simply went to a little switch mode power supply. I'm not going to, just 3 watt PSU is, I'll keep it simple. And the first of these units basically had the 3 big 1 watt LEDs in series. Red, green and blue. And you can change them to any colours you like ultimately. And the very first one I got of these, the motor was a little DC motor, and they actually tapped it directly off the output. So I think it was a 12 volt motor it used, because the output of this it's a current limited supply around about the 300 milliamps, and it will sit down, its floating voltage will be about 12 volts, but when you've got the LEDs in series with it, loading it down, you've typically got 2 volts across the red LED and 3 volts across the green and blue, so that would add up to about 8 volts. So that supply, 8 volts, was just used to drive a little 12 volt motor. In this case, they actually seem to have tapped the motor off. Get rid of that line. They've just tapped it off one LED, and I'm guessing maybe it's cheaper to use a 3 volt motor, and all they're doing is they're using the 3 volts across that LED to drive the motor. But when they're doing that, you're ending up with the current is then split between the LED and a load, the resistor, well, I'll just draw a resistor as a load, that emulates the motor. So not all the current that could have been going through the LED is going through it. It's being shared with the motor, and that could be 50 milliamps or something like that. It's going to reduce the brightness of the LED, which is why I thought it would have been quite nice putting it across the green LED. An alternative to make it run slightly slower, you could put it across just the red LED, because it's got the lower voltage. But let's go into this a wee bit further. It's very simple for that, you know, it just makes them very, very neat, and it's quite a clever idea. I think they could use different lenses than these. It would be nice to see one with sort of random lenses, just to create that sort of, what's the best way to describe it, that sort of plasma effect, where you get this sort of just morphing patterns because all the lenses are different sizes as they come in front of the LEDs. So I've just undone that. Oop. So here's it's an aluminium plate, which is nice. We'll and it's quite large, so it's going to dissipate the heat. Keep in mind that that power supply was putting out about 3 watts, but the combined forward voltage of all these LEDs is going to be modestly high. Let's test that right now. Now I've got this out, let's actually plug it in, and I shall check the voltage across those LEDs, which I would guess is going to be roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15, 16, 17 volts. Let's find out. It's quite attractive, the colours. It's a nice bright warm red, and it's unusual to see an orange LED. I'm guessing that's supposed to, well, you get the yellow LEDs as well, but the orange, as it moves close to the red spectrum, that technology seems to just look brighter. So let's look at the voltage across that first. I'll set this to 20 volts, and I shall dab onto here. Let's shove down so I can get a connection. It's about 18 volts. And the current going through it, let's just bridge out. In fact, let's just bridge out. The smallest impact is going to be shorting out either the red or the yellow. So let's put this round current. Set this to DC current. Actually, I'm going to have to go up to the 20 amp range in this one because I hope it's in the region of... It could actually be just 200 milliamps, but let's check. So I've got that to DC current, short that out, it's 140 milliamps, so if I could actually put that in the other setting. That means the LEDs are being run at half their power, which is even better. So let's see, yeah, that's nice. 150 milliamps for LEDs. The LEDs are effectively being run at half watt power each then. I'll just change it back from current back to the normal setting of the meter. Right, so that's quite smart. The power supply, I would guess, let's unwrap it, is just going to be the standard little thing. Oh, that's quite footery. Wrapped in the classic transformer type tape. I'm not sure the exact characteristics of this yellow tape. I guess it's probably a relatively high temperature tape. It's commonly used for insulation and transformers. And this is where I probably will just dab the... Oh, you know what? This is not using a chip. I'm just going to poke a screwdriver across that capacitor. Yeah, it's dead. It's not using the chip that I was expecting. It's using it's very reminiscent of the power supply in some of the little Poundland GU10 lamps, in that it's using the transistor here and a little surface mount transistor, and it's just basically a discrete flyback power supply, which is probably how they've basically managed, by probably the choice of one resistor, they've managed to set the output down to a lower current. So yeah, really not a lot to say about this. The temptation is to try that for a start without, if I should have put the soldering iron on before now, to try it without the motor in line, just to see if that... Actually no, that's not going to help. I'm not sure if this is just the motor on its own. Actually, you know, I can do that, I can test that. I can put a power supply on this and I can just run the motor on its own. Well, I won't be able to run the motor completely on its own because the blue LED will also want to light, and let's keep the voltage quite low. Let's try that. Yeah, the motor is quite high-pitched and noisy, yes. Okay, right, well that answers that question. So I could jumper this across. I could solder this across, say for instance, the red or the orange LED. So let's go for the red and we'll see if we can slow it down a little bit. Or I could do what I originally said and I could solder it across the green LED. This solder iron is not quite heated up yet. Or I could just disconnect the motor completely and then it'd be a nice quiet light and just project lots of beams of light, which would actually be quite nice. I have to say this aluminium heatsink is making the desoldering of this just that little bit harder. Yes it is, that's really sucking the heat away from the solder iron. Oh, I think I might end up just be about to give up on this. Oh, that is really sucking the heat away from that connection. This is one of these tasks that the beefier iron would actually have an advantage. There we go. Just a little bit of patience, and of course the lead-free solder has probably been used, which is the much higher melting temperature. Well, a relatively higher melting temperature. So which of these LEDs was the green one? Or do I just want to leave the motor disconnected? Oh, decisions. So many things you can do when you're modifying things to suit your... so that's the blue, of course that's the pink. That's the green. The temptation then, I'm not sure. I could just put it across the orange, but that's one of the dullest colours, so I could put it across the red. Let's put it across the red. That should theoretically make it run a little bit quieter and slower, because the red's got a lower voltage across it, about 2 volts. So let's flow some nice juicy lead-based solder onto that. And re-tin these wires. And in fact reroute these wires underneath. So let's go there. And to there. And I suppose I'll wrap some Captain tape around that and then I'll put this together and we'll take a wee look at it. Okay, well that is a little bit slower. It's just as noisy, but well, it's not actually quite as noisy, but yeah, I'm not sure 100% whether I'd rather that was just static without any movement at all, because that's still quite easy to do. Let's see how that looks, shall we? So now I've just lopped the motor right off, and do you know what? It does look better with a little bit of movement, doesn't it? It would be nice if they put a really slow motor in these. All the ones that you see tend to be really fast. It would be nice to go for the sort of retro mirror ball look and just, you know, have it rotating really slowly. Just sort of trundling round like this very gently. Just for a little bit of ambient movement. But yeah, overall, these things are sort of... I like the fact it's using 6 LEDs. I like the fact it's... dropping the current through them, so they're going to last a good length of time. I mean, the thing runs fairly cool. And apart from that sort of slightly overspeed and whiny motor, it's quite a nice effect. It's certainly, you know, in a dark room, well, even in a well-lit room, it actually produces a surprising amount of light. It's quite attractive. But yeah, these are definitely evolving nicely. I wonder what the next stage of this evolution of these is going to be. Okay, one last experiment. I've brought the motor leads right out and I've stuck some crocodile clips on them here so I can basically run the motor from an external supply and set the voltage precisely. And unfortunately with these motors it takes a modest voltage to kick-start it into action. It takes over about 1.5 volts. But once it's started you can run it down to quite a low level, and this is currently running at 0.86 volts. And, well, what do you think? Subtle? Too subtle? Keep in mind that in a large room this would still look like quite a large amount of movement. I quite like the slow movement. I think it's a big improvement. Yeah, I do kind of like that. It's still relatively smooth. But yeah, so this scope, it would be interesting seeing these with a much slower motor fitted. But again, they're using very industry standard package of motor, and it may just not be available easily with the super low gearing. I don't know if there's many applications that would use that. But yeah, it's still got lots of scope for modification. And technically speaking, if you so desired, you could replace all those LEDs in there with the colour of your choice. It's got lots of potential.